Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Haley, and my production company is called LAPH Productions, and Stacy was asking if I'd be interested in presenting, and I didn't really think it fit in, because I have a company that if it stopped doing what we do, no one would maybe notice, and if I didn't make any money doing it, I'd still do it, so it's kind of an interesting, I don't need to necessarily say, yeah, it's a hobby of mine that is partly led to the career I have, and it's interesting because I can track everything back to almost one decision. Of every success I've had since then has been because I made this one decision. LAPH Productions is a comedy and arts production company. We do, it's going to be the royal we because it's just me. So I say we a lot because it makes it sound like it's a real thing where it's just me. But I did start it with a friend of mine, and that's actually where the LAPH comes from. It's an anagram of our initials. It's just cute. It's not really. It's Pete Lolos and Alex Haley are our initials. So I started doing stand-up comedy when I was up at Western Washington University. Any other Vikings here?
My daughter.
Your daughter. Okay, that does count. She's not here though. She's there. Good. That's good. She probably is more prompt than I am. She has an 8 a.m. class. Started doing stand-up comedy, and it's. I didn't want to do. I didn't think about doing it, and there's a couple of reasons why people get into, I think, creative arts or take the kind of plunge into something like stand-up or as a musician, and. One way is that you look at someone who's so good at what they do and you say, I want to do that someday, I want to be that good. And then there's the other side where you look at someone who's doing it already and you're like, well, I'm already better than that person. Why am I not doing that? And that's why I started doing stand-up comedy. It's because I said, well, I could do that if this guy's doing it. I moved back to Wenatchee after graduating from Western and wanted to keep doing this hobby, but there really wasn't a platform for it. There was a show at the Hurricane Lounge, if anybody's Wenatchee historian. There was a place called the Hurricane Lounge where I think it's the workout warehouse or kind of a dive bar, and they were doing comedy nights there every Tuesday. So when it said the father of comedy, which is kind of odd because I didn't.
I'll just call you grandfather.
Grandfather of comedy would be fine. Because I didn't come up with this idea, or I didn't necessarily start it. There was people doing it here before me. There's been plenty of comedy shows. I think I just saw an opportunity to grow it. But I was doing shows there every Tuesday, and eventually I was finding that I was begging this guy to give me stage time. And that was when I realized, well, no one's going to book me, nor should they. And so I had the idea of, I'm just going to start doing my own shows and put myself in them. So it started off very selfishly of, I'm just going to do this so that I have a platform to perform and do the hobby that I like, because I'm waiting around for people to ask me to do it, and it's probably never going to happen. So also, if you're a Wenatchee historian, there used to be a place called 10 Below, and it's now the level, what's that? It's below the rail station, if you remember that. There's a bar there. And this was back when it was this really cool ski bar, and now it's kind of a smoky nightclub. But at the time, there was this transition period where they were doing music and they were doing comedy, and that was where I decided I'm going to try and do a show here. And this is where the choice that I can track everything back to of anything I've done since then is I was driving to Central. So after I graduated from Western, I decided to delay real life for another year, and I went to beer school, which is a real thing. They have a program at Central called Craft Beer Production, or it's a craft beer trade certificate, and it's a 1-year program. It's 2 nights a week, and it's actually all chemistry and physics, and it's not just a drinking class. But I was driving over there, and I had there was one comedian that I knew that had performed in Western. His name was Big J Hollingsworth, and I was really nervous about asking him to perform. And I had this. I'd sent him a tweet, and he gave me his number, and he said to call. And for some reason, I was really nervous about calling him. And usually, I would say I would put that off. I'd say, "Oh, I'll wait till I'm in a better mindset or better place. And for some reason I said, screw it, I'm gonna call him. And it sounds silly now because it's just a simple phone call. But I feel like if I hadn't done it right then, I probably would have put it off and never done it. And I might not have ever done a show. And so I called him, and I asked him how much it cost for him to perform, and it was way lower than I thought it would be. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do the show. So we started doing monthly shows at 10 below because of this phone call, and because I had this thought of like, I'm just gonna do it, I'm gonna put myself in it. And the show went so well, and I had people coming up to me afterwards saying, who was that guy and how did you find him? And I found that I was getting credit for someone else's talent. And I felt that was almost as satisfying as performing myself. And so I have 1 minute, okay? So we'll get to the rest of the questions. So had that experience, we had the first show there. I realized I like promoting shows, I like putting on shows just as much as I like performing in them, but I still get to perform in them. And then I did that for, we did one show a month, and then I was a comedian that was so good, I thought, this person needs a bigger stage. And I had some success reaching out to sponsors like Ice School Brewing. They sponsor, I think, $100 so I could print posters. And then I realized, well, I could just scale that up and I could do a bigger show. So it was kind of these little successes of someone would give me $100, well, someone would probably give me $1,000 if it was a bigger show and if it was a bigger name. So long story short, that's what led to all the other successes that I've had with comedy. And now I work at the Performing Arts Center as the program director. We have a fun series called the Cold Winter Nights Comedy Series, which 2 of our sponsors are here, and maybe, hopefully not more that I'm missing. But so it's kind of, it's all led to this spot where I'm doing this partly as a career. It's still a hobby of mine. I still do it on the side. It's really become more of a brand, and the idea of creating LAPH Productions was simply so that it could take on a life that wasn't associated with my name, so it didn't come with any baggage, good or bad. It could kind of just be its own brand. And the unique challenge I have, if I have a challenge, is that there's a lot of shows popping up. There's a lot of people doing comedy now, which is great, and there's this. This instinct to get defensive or to get territorial and say this is my place. I'm the one who did this. It should go through me. And then there's this other thing of it's great. There's never too many restaurants in a town, right? There's never too many options for the consumer, and so that's where I'm kind of in this spot of how much do I want to cooperate with everybody, and when do I need to actually be competitive and say, well, I need to put my foot down, or I need to innovate, or I need to be more creative. So that was the 5-minute slow version, and then the 1-minute condensed version. But there's so.
Great.
Yeah, it's just interesting because it doesn't quite fit into. There are times not necessarily competing with ourselves, but I have to ask: is it, if I book someone at the Performing Arts Center, and then my production company books them into something like the Radar Station? That's the place where I do a lot of shows. Is it, what do I owe the Performing Arts Center because they're the ones bringing in this big name, but I can get them at a smaller price to do a night before? So there's conversations like that, but it's usually not necessarily competing with myself, but it does come up. Is everybody familiar with Radar Station? It's an art gallery, performance venue. Ron came and did a talk. Really cool, funky, eccentric art gallery / bar / venue, and it kind of fits in perfectly with almost anything you want to do. That's what Radar Station is great of. If you have an idea, it probably will work there, where it might not work next to Davis Furniture in the India House across from Centennial Park. Do a lot of shows there because I really connect with Ron and in his sensibilities, and that venue works really well. When I first started doing shows, I've done shows at Cafe Mela, I've done shows at Ten Below, what used to be Ten Below. I've done shows for the Clearwater Steakhouse Saloon, and I've done shows as a third-party promoter at the Performing Arts Center. And when I first started, it was very hard to get ticket sales, and we were charging $5 cover charge to come see comedy. And the ironic thing is, some of those shows, when we scaled up to do the Performing Arts Center, same performers, and we charged more, and they sold better. So I've found that there is a perception of quality that associates some of these, and there's also, it feeds into a little bit of how much you enjoy it. Of if you're putting yourself in the mindset of, I'm buying a ticket, I'm going out, we're going to have a fun night, tends to work out that way. If it's, oh, let's check out this comedy show, your expectations are a little bit different. So it's interesting that I could use the same performers in a different venue at a higher ticket price, and people enjoyed it more. That answer. So that's another interesting is where people, Rotten Apple, they came and spoke as well. And those are people that, when I got to know them, I realized they have the same goal for Wenatchee, same sensibilities. They're doing it the right way, and they're probably doing it a little bit better, or a lot better in some ways, because they're regular and they're intentional about it. And that's one thing that I've always been, since it's just me, I do it when I want to. I do them, if I don't, if it's a year I don't do it, doesn't really impact anybody else. So I probably would do them once a quarter. Sometimes they clump up, and I do more, or have more opportunities. And that is one thing that I'm seeing, is that Wenatchee is being represented outside the area for comedy, and we have this unique routing situation. Routing is when a group tours through an area. We're 2.5 hours from Spokane and 2.5 hours from Seattle. And most people are doing Spokane to Seattle, and that's a long drive. And so if they can come here, Toyota Center's doing that, PAC is doing that, and I'm seeing that as well. If you have comedians that just want to pop through. And so being able to take advantage of that, having a place like the Radar where I wasn't planning on doing a show, but they're coming through, and I can put them on there. So with Ron at the Radar, I'd been to a few events, and I thought this would be a great event to try out stand-up comedy. So that was one where I had the venue, and I went out and got the people. Now, Ron, that's where I'm going to do most of the shows if I'm planning to do shows. So now I'll have people that want to come through, and I'll say, let's go there. If they won't work at the Performing Arts Center, and the Performing Arts Center is, we have when we do shows there, we have full production value of a theater. We have all this talent in-house, but it's expensive to do a show at the Radar, very low stakes, but you can really have a good time there. So the brand of LAPH is mostly, it's just that. It's not really a business other than a way for people to connect with the brand and to associate. Essentially, it's just my taste and in comedy or in events, and then essentially the effort I put into promoting a show, the effort I put into taking care of the comedians, and that's what when I connected with Rotten Apple and Shy and Kelsey, they had the same sensibilities. They want to make sure that the performers are treated really well. They want to make sure that everybody has a good time, and that's essentially what it's about.
How do you get paid?
Sometimes I don't. So it's if I'm doing a show and putting it on, it's I take it all from the back end. If it sells well, I make money. Sometimes they're set up just to break even, and I typically have not lost money doing it. But again, it's one of those. How do you
tell whether you've lost or made money?
Well, the comedians cost a certain amount, the venue costs a certain amount, marketing, yeah. So typically, if it's I price it out so that I can pay for the comedians, I can pay for the marketing, I can pay for. Right now, it's a side hobby. It's partly my career because that's what programming is. I book acts that come through the Performing Arts Center, so it's very interesting. I could almost track that one decision of I had this phone call. I wouldn't have probably the job I have if I hadn't done that, because I wouldn't have had experience promoting shows and working with agents. I've always thought the other reason why to create a brand instead of just calling it Alex Haley Presents was it can take on a bigger life. It could live outside of the area. It can do whatever. So I've always had this mentality of it can be as big as it can, it can grow as big as I'm never going to try and keep it small, but I'm also not actively trying to expand it outside the area or grow it. So that's why it's a unique. And that's one of the that's one of the things that Rotten Apple has. They have a partnership there, so they hold each other accountable. That's one of the with me. If I don't do a show in 3 months, it's not as big of a deal to me or to anybody else.
How do I get on your mailing list?
You can go to. I have a Facebook page. It's called LAPH Productions, LAPH Productions. That's where most of the information will be disseminated through. There's a newsletter on there. I only send out stuff when I have shows coming up. I won't spam you. I've had a lot of success with shows and just through social media. This is a town that likes Facebook and responds well to Facebook, and you can get a lot of bang for your buck just doing that. If I were to write a book on networking, it'd be called Beer and Coffee, and it's basically just drinking coffee and drinking beer and getting to know everybody. So I have a benefit of I've grown up here and know some of the people, but I think it's people being able to align with what you believe in, and so I think if I do a show, I think the right people will say I want to go to that show because I trust that. But it is the competition. I have come to that kind of conclusion for the most part that competition is better for everything. And I've actually, because there's more shows, I've felt inspired myself to come up with different concepts because the concept of a stand-up comedy show is just there's a format to it, and that's kind of what everybody does. And I've tried to come up with different ways to bend that format to do something different, to have something more unique. And I think I've come up with some ideas because there's people doing the exact same thing right next to me, and so it has forced me to get more creative, which is a good thing. Well, I learned a great example, or I learned from Darren Reynolds. If everybody remembers, Darren used to own Cafe Mela, and he did lots of concerts. And I worked with him when I was working down at Pybus, and we did a lot of shows together. And one of the things that he told me was that the performer is your product, essentially. If you're putting on a show, that's your product. They're not your employee, they're your product. And so the better you can make them feel before and after and everything, the better show you're gonna have. And so one of the simple things that I decided to do as a performer, knowing what it feels like to do a show, I paid them before they went on stage. And a lot of people would say, why would you do that? What if they leave? What if they say something you don't want? Thanks. It was a great comment. But really, that's never going to happen. And a performer can do that once, and they can never do it again. And they're not going to do it for my $200. They're not retiring. So it was a simple thing, I think, that because I know what it felt like to be done with a show, and then, all right, can I get my check because I want to leave? And they're taking their time, or I forgot. It's frustrating, and it creates any amount of anxiety is bad for a performer in that sense. And so they're probably still going to have a good show, but it just making them relax even a little bit more helps a lot. And so that idea of if they come here, even if I don't make money on a show, I'd rather have them have a good time. So if it means I take them out to dinner and I take whatever money I made to take them out to dinner and make sure they have a good time, that's what I'd rather do than make that money. And I have found that I have, over the years, I've grown this network of comedians in Seattle. We have a great scene in Seattle. of people that trust me will probably do any show that I want to put on. For example, I did a show in Ellensburg last week, and the stage was, the audience was here, and the stage was about the height of the roof, and the bar was right here. And it was a very, very bizarre setup, and I get excited when I see those kind of challenges, but a lot of comedians would not like that, and because they knew me and trusted me, we had a great show, and they weren't upset that I put them on this weird stage and this weird, it felt like doing a show at a Wild Wild West bar where they're just hooting and hollering and you're trying to talk about line bikes. But it's because I built that trust with them, they're kind of willing to go into situations like that. They're willing to say yes to, they don't need that much more information other than I'm doing the show. And so I found that I think I have a good reputation because of that, and I think Rotten Apple people are doing the same thing. And we have Badger that's doing shows, and Chateau Fairlepont is doing shows. The Clearwater was doing the Hush Hush. They stopped doing shows, but there's more and more popping up, and so that's where I try and distinguish myself, is with the comedians, with the performers. And one of the challenges, it's also a good thing, is that a lot of people assume I'm doing all of those. And that's where where do I draw the line of, it's good that I'm recognized that way, but if they're not doing the shows the way I would want to do the shows, or the comedians are coming over thinking it's my show, even if I'm not there, and they have a bad experience, I don't want that to reflect on me. So that's one, if I have a challenge of the growing industry, that's possibly one of them, is that I'm getting credit, good or bad, for some of these shows. Well, you can become a member at the New American Performing Arts Center. Thank you. Well, I think it's anytime we can get people to turn off the TV and go out in Wenatchee is a good thing. With the events I do at the PAC or anywhere, I try and keep that in mind, that people have to get babysitters, they go out to eat, they get drinks, they get cabs or Ubers, that the ticket price is possibly the cheapest thing that they have that night. But it's all centered around that event. And so, especially with the PAC shows, I really want to create an event that they go to, and they're tying their whole weekend around that, or their whole night around that. And so keeping that in mind is, so the question was, how can we help you? Just turn off the TV and go out and support the Wenatchee economy. So anytime there's an event going down here, the restaurants are doing better, the bars are doing better. We want to do more and more, and if more people are going out, we can bring in bigger shows, we can bring in more shows, it's just going to snowball from there.
I would buy a dinner and like India House and comedy package.
Yeah. And that's another, I've thought about getting more creative with how the show is packaged. And
India House and comedy.
there you go. That's usually my process anyway. So.